So, Vlad, you are a comms director by day, a stand-up comedian, and rock star by night. How did you get started with those nighttime activities?
It's more of a challenge to me because I've been doing comms most of my working life. And sometimes I do see people on LinkedIn next to their titles that would call themselves storytellers, for example. And I'd be like, really? What kind of stories have you told recently? Then I looked at profiles and nothing much really. So I thought, hey, I sometimes call myself as a storyteller. So as a challenge to myself, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put myself out there and see how it goes. To me, the litmus test of a storyteller is if you tell a story to a person and the person reacts, whether you get an emotion out of it, then that's how you've won. You've set the message across. And that's our job anyway as communicators. So I thought that stand up would be a great platform because you get your reaction immediately. It's the fastest reaction that you would get. And a lot of things are involved: storytelling, the writing, the concepts that they create, intonation, diction, even acting, and then how you even scan the room and get the mood of the people. All that is so many layers above simple writing that many storytellers and comms people do. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put myself out there. And I did. So far, I've done it 4 times. I've got good reactions the first two. The last two were hit and miss. But that's the best thing about this whole exercise. You learn very quickly, very immediately, and then you can calibrate and recalibrate. And that's what most stand-up comedians do anyway. Some of them, their jokes have been around for like decades, and they just keep doing it and perfecting it. As for the other one about me forming my band, and I'm just trying to be creative. I've been a rock head since I was 13, 14 years old. And I just thought, and I did have a shortly lived band when I was in university. But you know what? It's never too late to restart again. And here we are. We've been writing songs. We've just had our first gig 2 weeks ago. It was electrifying. It was beautiful. Friends of friends came, and they appreciate the songs. And I think all of this, whether it's stand up or whether it's writing songs for a band, it's just part of what I like to do, which is to communicate and engage people. So it's just an extension of what I really am passionate about. So in a nutshell, that's how it came about, Joe.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And you definitely have the hair and the outfit for the rock star look. So you got that pulled off. I definitely don't have that. So,
Yeah.
oh,
Thank you.
truth be told, I've always wanted to become a stand-up comedian as well, too. I've probably binge watched every comedian there is. And I
Yeah.
know how tough it is. I try to do it now when I speak at conferences.
Ah,
And
okay.
it's some, like you said, sometimes the jokes land and sometimes it's just crickets. And I the latter because it's awkward, but then it forces you, like I said, to try something new, try something different, and keep the audience engaged because, like you said, it's real
Definitely.
time. If they're not engaged early on and they're zooming out, then that's the death of
Definitely.
a stand-up
Yeah.
comedian.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, what have been some of the key learnings that you've been able to apply, say, in your day-to-day job from these nighttime activities?
Oh, I see. It actually interacts. It can be both from comms to the nighttime activities and the nighttime to the daytime, really. I think the chemistry between those two is just amazing, really. For example, the key part would be, it's so important. Just learn your audience, learn what they want to hear, what they need to hear, learn what would make them act a certain way, what kind of behaviors you want to get out of them. So that applies both in business, in comms, as well as in stand up, as well as in communications through music as well. I think that is so key. And after you've discovered what your audience is about and what they want to hear and what they like, and then that's when you weave in whatever messages you have, whether it's a corporate message or whether it's your own personal belief. It can be anything. It can be about love or your own political beliefs, for example, and what you want to get out of the audience. And you just weave that in. You think of the themes, the messages, and you have to be a bit more creative with even the words you put out. I find that most difficult in writing songs than in creating a script for stand up. And because in writing songs, that extra layer is how do you put it exactly into the cadence of the notes? So that to me is an extra layer of skill that you need to have. It's so much fun just doing all of these really. And and the last bit was probably about practicing. You have to practice every time until it becomes almost muscle memory. when I play with my bass guitar, or when our drummer, our other two guitarists, we play, we just rehearse so many times, such that the first performance just sounded really, the level was higher than I expected. And after that, the feedback that I got from the audience was that sounded really solid. And you know it's solid because the way you end the song and suddenly it's just silence, and then there's this clapping and people will just be shouting. And then that's when you know the cadence was so in tune and in sync that it worked for the people. It's all about preparation and practicing. And I think that works really well, whether it's comms, script writing, or music writing.
Yes, it sounds like you talked about getting to know your audience. I'm envisioning you when you go up in the stand-up crowd or the rock crowd, and you're building your persona mapping, you're building demographics and stuff like that.
Yeah. And thankfully, the demographic between stand-up and the music crowd are fairly the same. Some people around their earlier mid-20s up until their, let's say, early through mid-50s. And the themes they want to talk about is roughly the same. They like talking about love and relationships and what makes us all angry, what makes us sad, what makes us happy, what makes us feel thrilled, and what makes us successful. There's a common theme amongst this certain demographic, especially in Singapore, especially among the expat crowd in Singapore. We all have a certain theme going on, and people can really quite relate to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we pull it back to the day job. We're talking about comms or marketing. It generally try to split up into different demographics. So now everyone's talking about Gen Z and millennials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're saying that there's these universal themes that cut across these demographics, like you said, relationships or laughing at your job, whatever it is that cuts through, would you say?
Indeed. But in fact, I'm still puzzled over the whole, how we try to compartmentalize and delineate the boomers, the Gen Zs, and the millennials. To me, it's rather arbitrary, because to me, themes around love and human relationships and emotion, those are universal constants. Those are evergreens. That's why we love songs from the 40s, from the 50s, songs from Led Zeppelin or from Queen. Those are really old songs. Even when I was a kid, when I was singing We Will Rock You by Queen, that was already an old song. But today, I hear friends and their kids, they sing to Queen's We Will Rock You even today. They're just classic. So I go for the themes. And once you have a really good hook, whether it's an intro to a joke or whether it's a certain guitar lick, then that's when you hook the people. A good cadence, that's a good message, and a good theme. I think that can go a long way.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how you develop your themes. The reason I ask is I was speaking with a marketing director recently, and she says, I want to reach this mass audience, like you were saying, from 20-something to 50-year-olds. The messaging was a bit too generic, or it didn't really fit kind of that audience. So I'm curious, how do you pick your themes based on this kind of wider audience?
All right, okay. I think it becomes a lot more personal. And the more personal you are, the more authentic you are. I think in my case, I used to be a painfully shy kid when I was a kid. But actually, one story here is that my mom actually pushed me to join a summer workshop for a week or so. And the point here is she knew that I was really shy, so she just wanted me to be out there and try to perform a little bit. So I did go up the stage. My first performance was not even a speaking role. My role was I was a monkey, but I had a mask. But I saw how the other kids interacted on stage and how they just got a really good feeling out of performing in front of the rest of the school. I guess what I'm trying to say is that everything is very internal. I also grew up thinking I had a more political view when I reached university. I was a lot more left of center then. And that kind of imbibed into the whole punk rock genre, which is all about self-expression and rebellion and even questioning the status quo. So to me, writing the songs that we have put out on Spotify already, they do relate to issues of racism, inequality, for example. And these are very dear to me. And I think I can only be genuine when I write songs which are really coming from my heart. I think that is one thing which many companies miss. I feel like when you try to sound too corporate, your language is just so blurry. It just becomes full of jargon, and I hate jargon. When I was a journalist, one of the main rules in journalism is you just write really simply. If there's a jargon there, you have to explain it, or just don't use it at all. Unfortunately, many companies think that by using more jargon, you can impress your audience. And you end up, they think you can impress them, but you're not really expressing yourself. I think it's the usage of the language. The simpler your language, the better, really, Joe. But going back to the theme, really, I would even go a step backward here. It's more your intention, not so much a theme. If your intention really is to express it as simply as you can, because nothing is as effective as a simple and clear message. The simpler it is, the better.
I completely agree. I was an ex-journalist as well too, and it irks me when I see a lot of, particularly in corporate as well too. I see it on both sides, B2C as well as B2B. These kind of very fluffy, generic statements that don't really resonate with the audience because they're trying to figure out what that means. So I'm definitely with you on that. Going back to your point about making it personal, I think this is another thing that corporates are really not great at. So they either keep it very robotic in their language, or they try to fabricate these stories that don't really exist, that are supposed to be like tearjerkers, but you're like, it feels like a machine, like a ChatGPT is writing these, and it doesn't resonate. So I think going back to your point, finding out what's personal to you and the employees and the organization, and then telling those personal stories, I've always found worked extremely well when you do it right. But hopefully the folks listening to this will do more of that after this.
Definitely. And when we talk about stories and personal stories, as you say, the key word there is personal, and the key word as well is the word person. Companies are made up of persons. We're made up of people. We are not robots. So avoid using robotic language, because that just gets you nowhere. I still hear too many people in the banking or tech industry use words that no man on the street would ever use. I was once helping write or edit this newsletter for a bank/tech company. And one of the guys I interviewed used this very highfalutin tech word. I said, what does that mean? And then he said, just use it anyway, because the people would know what it means. If I don't know what it means, then what about the rest of our readers, right? So then he went on leave. And then when I need to clarify that same word with his teammate, his immediate teammate, I said, this is the word he used. What does it mean? Oh, I don't know what it means. So if his own teammate doesn't know what it means, then we're just really doing a disservice to all our readers. So as always, I would either check it out. If it doesn't give any relevance, if it doesn't give any explanation, or it doesn't clarify any idea, I'll just remove it. And I'll just stick to what I know should be out there as clearly as possible. Use the simplest language, and you're halfway there. You can reach the audience. There's a better chance of reaching out to our audience.
Completely agree. I could do a whole rant on this, but I won't for this episode, even when we catch up. Last question is, I'm curious, what has been your most memorable part of doing these night activities so far? What is the one thing that's really stood out to you?
This is quite recent. This is just 2 weeks ago during our first gig, really, when you see people at the back, I completely don't know them, and they're just like singing the song with you. And to think, how does that person even know? Yes, we put out stuff on Spotify. Then you realize all sorts of social media. And of course, Spotify is a very popular platform, but we use in Apple Music as well. So to me, it was almost like this really odd moment. It's almost like time stood still for me, and I could see these two people, their lips moving, they were in sync with me. And I just thought, oh, at least they got the message. And not only did they get it, they're actually seeing it back to me. So this it was almost like a two-way communication. They were fully engaged, and they were re-engaging me back. And so that to me was really special. I don't know them. At the end of the gig, I just approached them, said hi. I gave them some of our Minor Rebellion band stickers, and that's all I could afford at the moment. And they appreciated it.
I mean, that's next level special. Like you talk about interacting with the audience, them actually singing back the lyrics to you has got to be quite an experience. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your experiences. I found it super insightful. So I just want to thank you again.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Absolutely. And for everyone watching and listening to today's episode, if you want to break out, if you want to do something new and creative,